Hi guys, I hope you're doing well, and in this video we're going to be discussing the October-November 2021 paper 12. So let's get started. The first question says, to help reduce the price of oil, obviously oil is an important raw material, new supplies are needed. However, objectors oppose exploration of new sites because of the environmental damage it may cause. Obviously, exploration we know has an external cost attached to it. Why is this statement an example of basic economic problem? It is an example of basic economic problem because oil is a limited resource. It's a scarce resource. Definitely, the more you explore, the less it becomes for the future generations. Right, so that is why, to avoid depletion of limited resources, oil becomes a problem, a basic economic problem, since it represents scarcity. So question 1 should be A. Question number 2 says, what is an opportunity cost for a consumer spending money on holiday? Opportunity cost is basically the benefit of the next best alternative that you forego. So if a consumer is spending money on a holiday, definitely the next best alternative it is going to forego, that will be the opportunity cost, and that makes A the answer, because it says the potential interest earned if the holiday money had been saved. So if the consumer could have saved that money in a bank and earned an interest on it, that is the benefit it is foregoing because it's spending that money on a holiday. So A is the answer. The price paid for an air ticket to the holiday destination will not be the answer. A lot of students think that the money they are paying, so for example, if you buy something, right, and the money you pay for that, that's not the opportunity cost. Instead, the alternative spending that you could have done from that money, or maybe the alternative interest that you could have earned, or maybe you could have, any other benefit that is your next best alternative, is the opportunity cost for for any decision. So opportunity cost for any decision could be the alternative benefit that you're foregoing from making that decision. It is not the price that you pay for that decision, right? So 2 is the answer should be A for Apple. Question 3 states, helium is a gas that is limited in supply because it takes thousands of years to form. The US government holds 35% of the world's supply of helium and has been selling its stocks. Helium is an essential in medical scanners. It is also used to pay for party balloons, which is a wasteful alternative use of a valuable good. Which two concepts apply to this statement? Demand supply government subsidy, obviously not a government subsidy because they're not talking anything about government subsidy in the paragraph. Excess demand, resource allocation, known that they have not talked about the fact that there's excess demand for it. Opportunity cost, private monopoly, also this should not be the answer as well because they are not, in fact, as far as monopoly is concerned, yes, they're saying the government holds 35% of the world supply, but then that's a state monopoly, as in that's a public monopoly, not a private monopoly. It's not a private firm that we're talking about here. As far as opportunity cost is concerned, yeah, we are discussing opportunity cost because definitely opportunity cost is somewhat part of it, because it says the US government holds 35% of selling its stocks. Helium is essential. It is also used to pay for party balloons. So whatever decision the government is taking using helium for whatever reasons, there's an opportunity cost attached to it because it could be used in some other valuable output as well. So D should be the answer because A, B, and C is not the answer. So definitely D should be the answer then, because first of all, that they have talked about the government here, so that makes public sector, and then they're also talking about factors of production because helium is a natural resource. It comes under the factor of production. Land is always includes natural resources. Now guys, before I move on to the next question, there is one important thing I need to tell you, that whenever you will, all O-level students, whenever they are solving MCQ papers, that is paper 1, remember that there's no need to do the MCQs in order. In every O-level exam, there will be 12 to 13 MCQs that will be very, very easy. So identify the most easiest one and you do those. Right? When you do all the easy MCQs first, your confidence level goes up in the exam, and then you attempt the average MCQs that are on a difficulty level of average, and in the end you attempt the hardest ones. But first attempt all those 12 to 13 MCQs that will be very easy, and you can all because out of 30 MCQs, if you get the first 10 right, that are the most easiest. So 10 out of 30 means that you have attempted, you have in the first 10 minutes you have got 1/3 of the paper right. So your confidence level will go up in the exam. Okay. Then says, which combination of characteristics describes the public good? Public goods are those goods that are non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Non-excludable means that if I am using it, I can't exclude others from using it as well because they can use it as well. It's the same as for me as for them because I haven't paid for it, right? So public goods are those goods that are provided for the government because the free market does not provide them because of the free rider problem. So they are non-excludable, which means that I can, I can't stop anyone from using it. And they are non-rivalrous as well. Non-rivalrous means that if I use them, the benefit to others will not diminish. The benefit to others, or the utility or the benefit gained from using them, will not be lessened for anyone else. So for example, street lights, let's say, if I am taking the benefit of a street light, first of all, I haven't paid for it, so I can't stop anyone else from using it. Neither, if I'm using the benefit of a street light, neither the benefit of the street light gets diminished or reduced for my neighbor or for anyone else. The street light will provide the same benefit to me as it will provide for anyone else. That makes C the answer, non-excludable and non-rivalrous. So basically, these are the two characteristics of public goods, right? Question 5 states, what is the advantage of market economy? Market economy is an economy where resource allocation is done on the basis of demand and supply. There's a lot of competition. The private sector dominates, as in if it's 100% free market economy, all resources allocated will be allocated by the private sector. There will be no state intervention if it's 100% market economy. But as far as resource allocation in a market economy is concerned, it means that a market economy is an economy. It comprises of all those firms who are allocating resources based on the demand and supply mechanism or the price mechanism. So the answer is A, equilibrium. Market price clears the market. Definitely we know that in a free market economy, the equilibrium price is basically that price which clears the market, as in whatever is demanded is supplied. So for example, at P1, let's say 100 units are being demanded and 100 units are being supplied, and that is why we write quantity here means basically quantity that is traded, and this is the equilibrium quantity, which means that 100 units will be demanded and 100 units will be supplied. So at this point, the quantity demanded equals to quantity supplied. Any other price other than the market price, for example, if the price was, let's say, P2, so at P2 we can see that the quantity demanded goes down and the quantity supplied extends, so there will be a resulting surplus, a disequilibrium in the market. While at a price level of P3, we can see that quantity demanded would extend and quantity supplied would contract, so there would be, this distance would represent a shortage, right? So shortage and surpluses are examples of disequilibrium. And remember that in a market economy, the price mechanism makes sure that all such surpluses and shortages are auto-corrected without any need for government intervening and doing something about the surplus and shortage. And the equilibrium price basically makes sure that all the surplus and shortages are cleared, because at the equilibrium point there would be no surplus and shortage. This is what I'm trying to explain, that at the equilibrium price there would be no surplus and shortage, and that is why the equilibrium price is that price which ensures that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Question 6 says, what is a macroeconomic aim of the government? The macroeconomic aim of the government is balance of payment stability. There are other aims as well, such as low and stable inflation, low unemployment, high and sustainable and stable economic growth. Balance of payment stability means that there is no persistent excessive deficits or surpluses. So your BOP is basically stable, it's an equilibrium. We aren't witnessing long-term surpluses and long-term deficits in the BOP. That is what the macroeconomic aim of BOP stability means. Question number, income inequality is not unemployment. Obviously, unemployment is not the aim. We need to reduce unemployment. As far as income inequality is concerned, we need to reduce income inequality. Also, deflation is not an aim. We are not aiming for deflation. We are aiming for low inflation, right? Question number 7, the economy relies on potash to make fertilizer. A new deposit of potash is discovered. Which diagram shows this change in the market for potash? So obviously, if a new deposit of potash is discovered, it would increase the supply of potash in the market, and hence that should make D the answer, because here the supply is rising, right? So yeah, if a new deposit is discovered and it's extracted, so definitely supply would rise. So S1 to S2, supply shifts outwards. Question 8 says, the table shows the quantity demanded at different prices, from which fall in price is a demand price elastic. Okay, so price inelastic, sorry. So first of all, guys, what you need to do is that you need to calculate the PED. The formula for PED is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. In order to calculate the percentage change, remember, whether you're calculating the percentage change for quantity demanded or price, just use this formula, new minus old upon old times 100. What do I mean by that? New quantity demanded or new price, if it's for QD or P, O means old price, old quantity demanded, and just put these figures in the values. What I want you to do is I want you to pause this video and calculate the price elasticity of demand from. So for example, if the price falls from 6 to 5, 5 to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, calculate the PEDs. In fact, I'll be doing it with you. So if the price falls from 6 to 5, the quantity demanded basically rises from 3 to 4. So the new quantity is 4 minus old quantity 3 over the old quantity 3 times 100. The new price is 5 minus 6 over 6 times 100. You calculate the PD value, that should come up to, so basically the percentage change in quantity is 1 over 3 times 100, and that is 33.3%. Divide by the percentage change in price, and that is how much? That is 16.6. So percentage change in QD, if you divide 33.3 by 16.6, obviously the answer would be greater than 1. So because whenever the numerator is greater than, the numerator is more than a denominator, definitely the answer would be greater than 1. So this shouldn't be the answer, because if PED is greater than 1, that is actually elastic. And if PED is less than 1, it's inelastic. If it falls from 5 to 4, just calculate the PED. You take the new price, demand, that is 5 minus 4, divide by 4 times 100, that is 25% is the change in percentage change in QD, and the percentage change in price comes to 4 minus 5, that is 20%. Again, the QD is more, the change in QD is more than a change in price, which is telling us that it's elastic, so this is not the answer. From 4 to 3, you again take it, it's 2 divided by 5 times 100, so the answer is 40% is the change in quantity demanded, while the change in price is 1 over 4 times 100, which is 25%. So again, the numerator is more than a denominator, so obviously the answer would be greater than 1. So D should be the answer, right? So in my exam scenario, if I know that A, B, and C are not the answers, I will mark D the answer. There's no need to confirm this in the exam scenario. You move on if you're 100% confident if A, B, and C is the right answer. But let's see if D is actually the right answer or not. You calculate the percentage change in quantity demanded from 7 to 9 if the price falls from 3 to 7. So basically the new quantity would be 9 minus the old quantity 7 over the old quantity, that is 7 times 100. This is the same formula that I just mentioned over here, this formula. So it should be 9 minus 7 over 7 times 100 gives me 29, approximately 29%. This is the percentage change in QD. You calculate the percentage change in price, that is 1 over 3 times 100, and that should be how much? That should be 33 point something. So that's 33 point something, right? So percentage change in quantity demanded is 29% divided by, it's plus 29% because the QD is going up, while the minus price is in minus, so it's minus 33.33%. The answer should be 29 over 33.33. That is how much? That is 0.87, which is less than 1. So obviously that makes D the right answer. You ignore the minus sign if you're trying to see that if it's greater than 1 or less than 1, because the minus sign is just telling you the inverse relation. If you are comparing with greater than, if you're comparing any value, so for example, if the value of PED is minus 1.5, so you ignore the minus sign if you're checking whether it's greater than 1 or less than 1. So 1.5 is greater than 1, right? So that makes, so yeah. Anyways, question number 9 says, which government policy will increase productivity? As in, we know that productivity is a measure of efficiency. The higher productivity, the more the productivity, the lower the cost, the lower the average cost. So if productivity rises, the efficiency rises. So obviously, which government policy will increase productivity? Decreasing the training programs will actually reduce the productivity, not increase the productivity. So this shouldn't be the answer. Encourage labor-intensive production will actually, as in, we know that the capital-intensive production increases productivity. It increases the productive efficiency of the economy. So this shouldn't be the answer as well. Promoting good industrial relations will definitely increase productivity because it will result into good labor motivation, which will make them more productive. And as a result, they will produce more higher output using the same input. So if productivity is rising, it simply means that more higher output is produced using same inputs. If you're using the same inputs, we're actually ending up producing more higher output, or we are producing a higher output using less input. So in both the scenarios, just like you think now, you for example, if you're studying in the exam, you're studying for your exam. So in 1 hour, if you can finish 2 chapters for economics, and in 2 hours you finish 4 chapters of economics. So now this doesn't mean that your productivity has gone up. Although your total output has gone up, your total production has increased from 2 to 4, but that doesn't indicate, it's not an indication that your productivity is increasing as well. Because obviously if you finish 2 chapters in an hour, so in 2 hours you will be able to finish 4 chapters, assuming that your productivity is the same, it hasn't increased. But if you're actually able to finish in 2 hours, you're able to finish, let's say, 5 chapters, now your productivity is actually gone up, right? So remember that there's a difference between total production and productivity. Productivity is a measure of efficiency. If your production is rising, it is not indicating a rise in productivity if you're using the same inputs in the same number of hours to produce those same units. As in, you're using the same number of hours. As in, your productivity and efficiency level is the same, and then using that same efficiency level, you're producing a higher output does not indicate a higher productivity. But if you're able to produce a higher output using less inputs or the same number of hours, that's actually higher productivity. Question number 10 says the diagram shows the wage rates of cleaners, OWC, and nurses, OWN. What is the result if a national minimum wage is introduced? Remember that a national minimum wage means that the government is saying that, you are not going to pay the market wage rates. In fact, you will pay the wage rates that are, because the market wage rates might be less than the minimum wage, right? So you need to pay the minimum wages. Remember that minimum wages will only be effective if they are imposed above the equilibrium. If you're imposing a minimum wage that is less than the equilibrium, as in the market wage rates will prevail in that sense. So this is the market wage rate, and the minimum wage rate is higher for cleaners. So definitely the wage rates of cleaners will go up. So either C or D should be the answer. As far as for nurses is concerned, the minimum wage is imposed below the equilibrium, which is ineffective. So whenever a minimum wage is imposed below the equilibrium, it will always be ineffective. Remember that. So the answer should be D. The wage rate for cleaners will rise because you will be paying the minimum wage, and as far as the wage rate of nurses is concerned, you'll keep on giving them WN, right? Because minimum wage over here will be ineffective. And there's a simple logic to it. Obviously, if let's suppose that the minimum wages of nurse, as in the market wage rate for nurses is, let's say, $50 an hour, and the minimum wage is 40. So it tells us that you need to pay the workers a minimum of $40. So obviously, if the government is instructing the firms to pay a minimum $40 to nurses, so they won't. That's the minimum they are supposed to pay. But how much will they actually pay? They'll actually pay $50 then, whatever the market wage rate is. But over here, if the wage rate of cleaners is, let's say, $40, while the minimum wage is, let's say, $50, so here the government, it makes sense because now the government is saying to actually pay them $50 minimum. So they won't pay them $40 because the government by law has said you need to pay $50 minimum. Okay. Question number 11. Moving forward, it says which result of increased specialization in a firm is an advantage for the firm but a disadvantage. So they're asking that. They're questioning us that if there's specializations, what is an advantage for the firm but a disadvantage for the workers? So option A says, option A basically, just a second, question number 10. So yeah, the answer is D for David. Question 11 says, yeah, so, but a disadvantage for some of the workers in the firm, right? So yeah, if there is greater mechanization, actually seems the right answer, but let's see, what about higher productivity? Higher labor productivity, as in would be an advantage for the firm and the workers as well. Higher skill level would be an advantage for firm and the labor as well. Longer training times would be a disadvantage for the firm. As far as greater mechanization is concerned, this should be the answer because, as in, it will be an advantage for the firm because the more mechanization you have, as in the more mechanization you have, the more capital intensive you are, the higher the profits, because it will result into economies of scale and falling average cost, which will increase profits. But it's a disadvantage for the workers because it might result into redundancies and job losses. So if a firm is specializing and in the sense it's becoming more capital intensive, that would be disadvantage for the workers. Question number 12 states the diagram shows the imposition of a subsidy. We all know what a subsidy is. Subsidies are financial grants that are given by the government to the firms in order to reduce their cost of production and in order to reduce the market prices for the firms and in order to increase output. Basically, these are the three reasons why the firm gives a subsidy. Subsidies are basically paid to the firms. Remember, subsidy is a cash that is being paid by the government to the firm. This is a good question. It says which area represents total revenue. Total revenue is basically the total income or the money the firm will receive. So whenever a subsidy given, there are two sources of revenue or the money or the income the firm will receive. First is revenue from sale, right? And that should be how many units are now sold. Initially OL units were sold because this was the initial equilibrium. Now this is the new equilibrium, so OM units are sold, right? So the revenue for the firms should be price times quantity, that is a new price times the new quantity, plus the revenue from subsidy as well, right? The revenue from subsidy as well. Now as far as the revenue from the new price is how much, it's E, and the new quantity is M. So this entire box is representing the revenue for the firms. So it should be, so OEKM is basically the revenue for the firms, right? In terms of the product that is being sold. But we also need to calculate the revenue in terms of the subs, because the firm is also receiving a subsidy. That's money that the government is giving. That is basically, the formula is subsidy per unit, that is the per unit subsidy multiplied by the number of units that the firm is producing and selling. So quantity that is actually produced and sold. So how many units are actually sold? So first of all, how do we calculate the subsidy per unit? It is basically the vertical distance between two supply curves, right? The vertical distance. Now how do you do that? How do you determine the level of subsidy per unit? You take the new equilibrium, you move upwards to the old supply curve. Now this vertical distance is representing the subsidy per unit. So the value of this vertical distance is exactly this distance, right? So this is the subsidy per unit, and how many units are being sold? OM units are being sold. So this distance is actually equal to this distance, right? So the area of this box is length into breadth, right? This becomes the area. That is how much, whatever. So imagine this, the value is, let's say $10 times, let's say these are 100 units, because let's say from here till here these are 100 units. So length into breadth, 100 into 10 is 1000, is basically the value of the subsidy, that is total subsidy that is paid by the government to the firms. And there's a bit of mess here, let me erase that and I'll move further. So basically what we're saying is that the subsidy per unit is actually, so this area is representing the subsidy that is given by the firms by the government to the firm. So this is the entire area of subsidy. This is the revenue from subsidy, but it is also an expenditure to the government. And this area, the below area, is representing the revenue from the sale of the product, which makes this entire box the actual revenue for the firm. So the answer should be OGHM. So the OGHM, that makes D the answer. Okay, remember that. These kind of questions do come in the exam. You need to know the vertical distance between the two supply curves is a subsidy, multiply by the number of new units that are being sold, will give you the actual value of the subsidy that is given by the government to the firm, plus the revenue already earned from selling the product. So 12 is D for David. OGHM should be the answer. So question number 13 states the diagram shows the total cost curve for the firm. Remember that the total cost curve always starts from the point where the fixed cost starts. That is, fixed costs are those costs that are paid irrespective of whether you produce or not, and irrespective of the number of units that you're producing. So if you're incurring a $10 fixed cost, so remember that if you're producing 0 units, add 0 units, the value of the total cost, add 0 units, the value of the total cost will exactly be equal to the value of the fixed cost. So fixed cost is your total cost at 0 units. So what can be concluded about the firm? It has no fixed cost. No, it has a fixed cost. It has no variable cost. Obviously it has a variable cost because total costs are rising, which means that if you're producing more and more units, your total cost is upward sloping. It means that the variable cost is incurred. It has average fixed cost. No, this is not the answer as well, because average fixed cost falls. Its average variable cost is constant. Yes, this is the answer. Now I'll explain it to you guys. Remember, there are certain rules. You need to know fixed cost in total stays constant. I'm pretty sure that you know why it stays constant, right? As far as variable cost in total is concerned, it rises. It is directly proportional with the value of the output. Average fixed cost basically falls as you produce more. Why does average fixed cost falls as you produce more? The reason is that fixed cost is spread over a larger volume of output, right? It's spread over a larger volume of output. So for example, let's say that if your fixed cost is, let's say, $1,000 and you're producing 100 units, so your average fixed cost would be $10, right? But if you're producing 200 units now, so your fixed cost would change. It would still be $1,000, but now your average fixed cost would be $5. So it's basically spread over a greater volume of output. As far as average variable cost is concerned, your average variable cost basically, remember, falls as more units are produced. Sorry, my bad, guys. Average variable cost stays constant as you increase output. So average variable cost stays constant because average variable cost multiplied by the number of units gives us the total variable cost. And total variable cost is actually upward sloping, it's rising, right? But average variable cost stays constant, right? So average variable cost stays constant, average fixed cost falls as you produce more. Yeah, also remember that the sum of average fixed cost plus average variable cost is your average cost. Now the relationship of average cost is the average cost basically initially falls in the long run and then it starts rising. Why does it fall initially? It falls because of economies of scale. Plus we know that your average fixed cost is going down because more units are spread over a higher volume of, as in the fixed cost is spread over a higher volume of output. So average cost initially falls and then after a certain point it rises. And why does this rises? It rises because your diseconomies of scale is arising after you become too large in size that you can't manage the business. It's exceeding the optimum level. So and in this case, your variable cost, your variable cost starts rising at a very steep rate, at a very high rate. That is why it brings the average cost up. So the formula, as in the diagram for average cost, it's a U-shaped curve. Your average cost is going down in the long run. That is indicating economies of scale, and then it starts rising, which is indicating diseconomies of scale. The lowest point of the average cost curve is indicating the optimum output, which is telling us that your output should not exceed the lowest point of the average cost curve. On the y-axis, you label average cost in terms of dollars. On the x-axis, you measure output. Understood? Simple. You should copy these rules down. It will help you in the exam, okay? Moving forward, question number 14 states that the table shows the average total cost of a firm over a range of output. What happens after 4 units are produced? So we can clearly see that after 4 units, initially your average cost is going down because of the same reason I told you, economies of scale, and the fact that average fixed cost is spread over a higher volume of output. But then the 5th and the 6th units are produced, your average cost starts to rise from 5 to 7, then 7 to 9, and this is due to diseconomies of scale. Now, the simple reason is what happens after 4 units are produced. The answer to this question should be that the firm experiences management problems, because management problems is diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale means that your average cost starts to rise when you increase output. And the reason is that your average cost starts rising is because your average variable cost starts to rise at a very fast rate. And the simple reason is, your variable cost, my bad, not your average variable cost, your total variable cost starts to rise at a very fast rate. And the simple reason is that you begin to experience diseconomies. The fact that diseconomies are arising is the fact that your variable cost is rising at a very high rate, at a very steeper rate, because the big business has become so large in size that there's labor demotivation, labor productivity is going down, efficiency levels is going down, the labor might be using more inputs, producing less outputs. Definitely that drives up your variable cost. At the same time, there are communication issues, communication barriers. So overall, your costs are rising, and that is an example of diseconomies of scale. Your variable cost starts to rise at tremendous rates. That is what diseconomies of scale are. So that brings the average cost up. So that is why. So again, it's an easy. So B, C, and D doesn't make sense at all. The firm receives significant discounts as an example of economies of scale. So the firm pay lower. This is again an example of lower economies of scale. The firm gains benefits. The firm is not gaining any benefits. Question 15 states 2 cars manufacturers agree to merge. Okay, we know what a merger is. It's an integration. Which outcome would be advantages for customers? Increased capital for research and development would be an advantage or a disadvantage. Lower average cost would be an advantage or a disadvantage. Reduced range of vehicles produced would actually be a disadvantage. So this should be the answer. Use of wider range of marketing information is just as in this should be the advantage as well. But as far as in it could be an advantage for the firm as well as for if let's say we assume that there's more information available for consumers, so this should be an advantage for consumers as well. But C should be the answer, because when you merge, you become a large firm, and when you become a large firm, so see, if let's say firm A and firm B were initially, they were two rivals and they were competing, and because they were competing, they were trying to be the best and give new innovative product for consumers and give more choice to consumers. So now the choice will be reduced, the variety will be reduced, the range of vehicles produced will be reduced, the variety. Why? Because there are no more rivals anymore, so don't need to worry. Firm A does not need to worry what firm B will come up with a new product. Firm B does not need to worry what firm A will come up with a new product. So they both are rivals. They both are, so because of that rivalry and the competition that they had, consumers were actually benefiting. But now since they merged, they end the competition between themselves. That makes 15C the right answer. Question number 16 says an economy recorded a second month of deflation. What does this mean? We all know what deflation is. Deflation is when the general price level is going down. Inflation is when the price level is going up. So it's the opposite of inflation. So deflation is basically negative inflation as well. So whenever there's a negative inflation rate, let's say minus 3%, that's basically telling us that prices were falling, and it's deflation, right? As compared to deflation, you have disinflation. Disinflation is when there is inflation at a declining rate. That is, let's say in 2010, the inflation rate was maybe 6%, while in 2011, the inflation rate is 4%. So this is inflation, but at a declining rate. So things are getting expensive, but the rate at which they are getting expensive is falling. At times, so even if the rate of inflation is going down from 6 to 4%, this still means that the cost of living is going up, and this also means that the real value of money is declining, and this also means that things are getting expensive. So obviously things are getting expensive, because although the rate is going down, but then there is still inflation, right? So yeah, as far as deflation is concerned, it's the opposite of inflation. I mean, it's negative inflation. Negative inflation is when price level is going down. During times of deflation, the cost of living basically goes down, and the real value of money basically increases. Deflation arises due to two reasons. Either it could be due to a fall in AD, or it could be due to a rise in aggregate supply. If it's due to a fall in aggregate demand, it's bad deflation, while if it's due to a rise in aggregate supply, that's good deflation for good reasons. Answer should be B for boy, price level was falling. Question number 17 says, what is the cause of demand for inflation? Demand for inflation is an inflation that arises due to a rise in aggregate demand faster than output, because AD is rising at a faster rate while the firms are not able to respond. There's excessive pressure on the existing factors of production, which raises their factor prices, and that feeds through the economy through demand for inflation. So basically, the answer would be for boy, because due to aggregate demand basically means your total spending that comprises of spending by consumers, investment spending, government spending, and net export spending. So if either of the components, whether C, I, or G, or net exports go up, your demand for it will result into demand for inflationary pressure. So 17 is boy. Question 18 says, what is a consequence of economic growth? Economic growth for individuals and economies. Consequence means what as in what will happen because of economic growth, right? What's the effect of an economic growth? Remember, consequence could either be positive or negative. So what is economic growth? Economic growth is simply increase in real GDP. There are two types of economic growth: actual growth and potential growth. Actual growth happens when AD increases, that is your as in your firms are using existing capacity, and another is potential growth, where your LRAS goes up, and that is due to shift in production possibility curve. And this happens when your AD goes up, that is your aggregate demand shifts to the right, and this movement from national income from Y1 to Y2, this upward movement is basically the extension in aggregate supply is due to the result of economic growth, and that's actually actual economic growth when firms are using existing capacity. Anyways, so as far as the consequence of economic growth is concerned, for individuals it will be obviously good, because it will increase their average income, since national income would go up, average incomes will go up, and so will tax revenues, because obviously whenever economic growth arises, whether it's potential or actual, your national income goes up, your real GDP goes up, and definitely firms are making more profits. Income taxes will obviously, but revenue from income taxes will also rise, revenue from corporate taxes will also rise, since spending is also increasing, so government revenue from indirect taxes will rise as well. So the answer to 18 should be boy, B. The table shows the government's receipt from taxation. What is the amount of revenue raised by indirect taxes? There are two types of taxes: direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are those taxes that are paid by the individuals on whom it is imposed, as compared to indirect taxes, also known as expenditure or spending tax. They are imposed on firms, on the product, but the burden is indirectly, they are indirectly paid by the consumers, depending upon the price elasticity of demand. Either the producers transfer the entire burden or some of the burden, depending upon the PD. I've made an entire video on indirect taxes and the transfer of burden as well. You can go and check it out on my channel. But as far as in the O-level economics playlist, as far as this question is concerned, duties are indirect taxes, import duties are indirect taxes, inheritance tax is direct tax, VAT is an indirect tax. This is a direct tax, this is also a direct tax, or a direct tax. So the answer to this should be, what should be, as in 85 plus 300 should be, my calculator is not, it's not working. The answer should be 385. The 19 should be C. C for Charlie. So 19 should be C. Right. By the way, I just ordered something last night on Food Panda, and I realized that they are like I was paying 100 VAT on it. But anyways, question 2. So 19 is C. Okay. 20. Which supply side policy measure would match the skills of the workers to job vacancies? By the way, supply side policies are government policies that are designed to increase the aggregate supply and increase the real GDP of the economy. They are designed to reduce. So supply side policies are basically two types. Either they are short-term policy measures, supply side measures, or long-term. The long-term supply side policies are aimed at increasing potential growth, that is increasing the productive capacity of the economy, resulting into sustainable economic development, such as infrastructure development, spending on education, healthcare, labor reforms. While short-term supply side policies are aimed at giving some supply shocks, positive supply shocks, to temporarily reduce cost and boost the economy's output by giving subsidies to key industries, or reducing the level of taxes on those industries, right? So that the cost goes down and real GDP goes up. So the answer to 20 should be boy, because they're asking which supply side policy measures would help to match the skills of workers to job vacancies. So definitely, if you retrain unemployed workers, that would definitely reduce their occupational immobility and make them more employable, and as a result, they'll be able to match the skills. Otherwise, we know that if you're unemployed for a long period of time, you become occupationally immobile, and then you just get dependent on government's welfare benefits, resulting into voluntary unemployment. Anyway, so as far as question 20 is concerned, B should be the correct answer. Question 21 states, how is the rate of inflation measured? Through your consumer price index, where a basket of goods is selected of an average consumer, and those prices are ranked and weighted against, and that weighted average index is calculated, and then the rate is calculated through the CPI. So by that, so the question 21, the answer should be A, because you're calculating the change in the prices, right? That's what rate of inflation is. By the way, if they have given you an index, let's say in the question they gave you 2010, the CPI was, let's say, maybe 120, while in 2011 the CPI was 125, and they want to calculate the rate of inflation. So how will you do that? You'll simply apply the formula: new index minus the old index over the old index times 100, right? So 125, which is the new index, minus 120 over old index 120 times 100. Whatever the answer is your rate of inflation. If the answer is a negative, it's indicating a deflation. Anyways, so obviously part B, this is not the answer, because you're not calculating the real value of output, right? Neither you calculate total number of people willing and able to, neither you calculate total value of export. So A is the answer. So even if you didn't know the answer, but you still know that B, C, and D are incorrect, you could still mark A as the right answer. Question 22 was actually removed because of some reason. Maybe it was out of syllabus or whatever. Question 23 says, which combination of policy measures is most likely to reduce the level of employment? So employment could reduce due to expansionary supply side, expansionary monetary or fiscal policies. So if you decrease the level of general taxation, let's say, that's an expansionary fiscal policy. It would reduce the cost for firms, and increase the aggregate supply, increasing aggregate demand, and as an increasing real GDP, and firms will employ more workers since their cost is going down. Or maybe you are reducing your maybe taxation, not only indirect taxes, but let's say you're reducing direct taxes as well. Let's say corporate taxes are going down. So if corporate taxes are going down, so basically that would increase the investments, and investment is a component of AD, because firms would invest more in machinery and equipment. That's what investment is, and which would actually increase employment. If you also reduce the tax, let's say you reduce income taxes, that would actually motivate the workers back to join the labor force. At times, income taxes are so high that workers actually exit the labor force and they just get dependent on welfare benefits. They say we're not working because there's no point in working, because so much of the money is actually being paid in taxes. So in that sense, yes, employment levels would rise, and reducing the rate of interest would actually reduce the cost of borrowing. This is an expansionary monetary policy. Monetary policy, there are two things, that is interest rates and money supply, and also exchange rates, by the way. So if you reduce the cost of borrowing, as in firms would borrow more money to invest more, so investments would go up, hence AD would go up. Consumers would borrow more money, hence so that they can spend more, so consumer expenditure would go up, so AD would go up. So yeah, definitely employment will rise. And if you diagrammatically see this, I mean, definitely if AD rises, as in your national income would go up from Y1 to Y2, and we can see that this movement is representing an extension on aggregate supply, which means that firms are actually employing more workers to match the increase in aggregate demand, which is actually reducing cyclical unemployment, right? Poverty in households may be defined in relative terms. We know that there are two kinds of poverty. We have absolute poverty, and then we have relative poverty. Absolute poverty is when it's a condition where the household income is such that you cannot even afford the basic necessities. You can't afford food, shelter, and housing. And according to the international organizations, absolute poverty is when you're living on less than $1 a day. I mean, you can't even earn $1 a day. That's when absolute poverty is. And as far as relative poverty is concerned, relative poverty is a situation, a condition where the income is it is a certain percentage below the average incomes that are required to maintain a certain standard of living. So for example, it could be maybe your whatever incomes you have, I mean whatever required incomes you should have to maintain a certain threshold of living standard. Maybe your income is less than that threshold, right? So that is when there is so that is what relative poverty is. So it's below, maybe you could say that in some books it's also mentioned that when households are receiving 50% or 60% less than the average median incomes that are required to maintain a certain threshold living standard, right? So the answer to 24 should be A, because relative poverty is it's falling below the society's expected standard of living. That is the it's below the certain threshold required to maintain a certain standard of living. Question number 25 states that what is the effect on an economy of net immigration? E means for exit. Net immigration simply means that you are netting the immigration as an emigration with an E, with immigration with an I. So it's basically emigration minus immigration. Immigration means I means coming in, people who are coming in your country. E means exit, people going out. So net immigration is the difference between immigration I minus immigration. It's the difference between immigration E minus the I immigration. I don't know how to pronounce. E is for immigration, I is for immigration. Anyways, so what are the effect on an economy of net immigration of people aged 20 and 40? So what's the effect? So net immigration means that there are more people going out of the country, exiting the country, than people coming in. If it was net immigration, and if net immigration was positive, so it would have meant that more people are coming in the country. But if net immigration is positive, it means that more people are actually leaving the country than coming in. So 25 should definitely be boy, because what will happen is that if people are exiting the country, especially people aged 20 and 40, it would reduce the population size. And in populations, it would reduce the population size, first of all, because the size of the population is dependent upon three factors, that is the birth rate, the death rate, and the net migration rate. That is net migration, like I said, how many people are coming in versus how many people are going out. So if you're calculating net migration of people, and if under that net migration you have a positive net emigration, that is more people leaving the country, So in that case, you will end up having an aging population. Why? Because obviously the middle-aged people, the young and the middle-aged people are actually have left the country, and you're only left with people who are retired and old age and dependent population. So aging population, it's a sign that people your population size goes down, and the distribution of population is such that you have more aging population in the economy. So 25 should be boy. 26 shows the table shows the statistics for 4 countries. Which country has the lowest standard of living? So these kind of questions do come in the exam. So basically, they have given indication in sorry, they've given indicators. These indicators are indicators of measuring living standard and economic development. So you have average annual growth rates of population. Obviously, the higher the growth rates, the lower the living standard is. The higher the population density, the lower the living standard is. By the way, what is population density? Population density is telling us it's the concentration of the population or the individuals within a specific area or a certain geographical location. It's how closely they are concentrated. So the more the population density in a certain area, the lower the living standards would be. Life expectancy, we all know what life expectancy is. So the higher the life expectancy, the better it is, the lower, the worse it is. Real GDP per head should be obviously higher. Real GDP per head is basically real GDP over population. It simply is telling us your income per head. It's telling us the real incomes per head. It's telling us that how much on an average, it's simply telling us how much on an average a person earns in 1 year. Because we calculate your GDP in a year, right? So real GDP per head is telling us how much on an average you're earning in a year. So as far as the lowest living standard is concerned, easy way is that you look at the life expectancy and real GDP. The country with the real GDP that has the lowest is 190 here, 190 here. So it could either be A or D. But in my opinion, it should be D, because country D also has the lowest life expectancy of 44 years and the highest population density, as well as far as the annual growth rate of population is 4.2. So higher population growth rate is not a good sign of economic development. It's indicating poor standards and lack of focus on education and careers. So 26 should be D for David. 27 is saying a country specializes in the production of steel, toys, and textiles. What is the disadvantage of specialization for a country's workforce? Now, one of the disadvantages, it could create over-dependency on specialization. If in future the demand for goods and services changes, it could result into huge levels of structural unemployment. For example, if you're too much dependent on primary sector output, and if your country later on becomes developed and more focused on the tertiary sector or somewhere in the somewhere in the secondary and the tertiary sector, then in that case, if you're overly dependent on primary sector output, your major GDP is coming from that, and your workers are trained in primary sector output, such as fishing, mining, and agriculture, subsistence farming. In that case, what is going to happen is that it could result into structural unemployment. So what is the disadvantage? The answer should be B. They could become structurally unemployed if global demand changes, right? Question number 28 is telling us the diagram shows China's trade with Brazil for 2 years. So we have China's exports, that in light gray, and dark gray is telling us in year 2 and that in year 1, versus imports. What happened to China's trade balance? Trade balance is telling us, balance of trade is telling us the difference between export revenues that are earned minus the import expenditures made from the goods, right? So if the exports are greater than imports, so in year 1 we could see that exports are somewhere around 0.9 while the imports are somewhere around 0.7. It's less than 0.9. So obviously it's telling us that in year 1 the exports tells us that in year 1 the exports are more than our imports. You don't need to calculate the exact value for it. And in year 2 we can see that the value, so if exports are more than imports, it's a surplus, right? It's a surplus in balance of trade. Balance of trade is in a surplus. And in year 2 what happens is that your imports, you can see your imports are this much, right, while your exports are this much. So imports are more than your exports, so it's indicating a deficit. So the answer should be D for David. It moved from surplus to deficit. Question number 29 says the US imposed tariffs on cars and motorcycles from Germany. What is the effect of these tariffs? Tariffs are basically taxes on imports in order to reduce the size of your imports. and it makes imports expensive by increasing the world price of imports, so that your expenditure is focused on domestic goods more as and less on imported goods. But the effect of tariffs obviously depends upon the price elasticity of demand for imports. Now they're asking us what is the effect of these tariffs. So obviously it is going to reduce the size of the imports, and it will decrease the trade between US and Germany. So obviously the import of if US is importing from Germany cars and motorcycles, it will reduce. And maybe if Germany was if US was exporting something to Germany, so maybe Germany might retaliate and buy less of US goods as well. So overall the trade will reduce, right? Question 30 says, what is an immediate effect for a country of a fall in its exchange rate? Fall in an exchange rate means your currency gets weak. The external value of the currency goes down. Remember that the internal value of a currency is telling us the purchasing power of that currency, which obviously goes down because of inflation, while the external value of a currency is telling us the exchange rate. So let's talk about US and UK. And for the purpose of this MCQ, we'll assume that we are in the US. So let's say a dollar is worth 3 pounds. $1 is worth 3 pounds, right? And if the US currency weakens, that would mean that now $1 is worth, let's say, half a pound. So in that case, what will happen is we could see that initially US could import 3 pound worth of goods by paying $1, but now from that same $1 it can only import 1.5 pound worth of goods. So imports, the price of imports have gone up. Your imports have gotten expensive. That should actually reduce the quantity of imports and reduce your import expenditures, which is actually a good sign. On the other hand, if you talk about exports for US, so exports have become cheaper. Why? Because the people in UK, the consumers and firms in UK had initially had to pay £3 to buy import $1 worth of goods. Now they only have to pay 1.5 pound to import $1 worth of goods. So it's cheaper for them, so they might end up importing more from USA, and as a result the USA's exports would go up, so quantity of exports would go up, which would actually increase the export revenue. Now as far as this effect is concerned, it would actually improve the balance of trade of USA. So if USA's balance of trade was in a maybe deficit, it would either reduce the deficit or it would it would reduce the deficit. It's a favorable thing for USA. But as far as question 30 is concerned, they're talking only about the price of exports. So we can see that the price of exports for USA will go down, so it will make exports more competitive exports. But remember that here the exports are becoming artificially competitive. It's not that USA has somewhat improved its productive efficiency or the cost of production for those exports have gone down. It's just that it's an artificial advantage that the USA has gained because its external currency value has gone down, which has given USA some sort of a competitive edge in as compared to other countries, because now maybe UK people will import more from USA since they only have to pay 1.5 pound, maybe before they were importing half from USA and maybe half from some other country like China, but now they might end up importing all from USA. So they have artificially made the USA's exports more competitive, right? So yeah, it was a good paper. I hope you enjoyed this paper. I'll see you all around in the next video with another paper. All the best, guys. Take care.